Okay, I'm not going to use the microphone. I think everyone can hear me. Yep. Okay, good. Well, it's great to meet you all. Really appreciate everyone coming out to the collective. We're really excited to have everyone. So we have a few sessions here for y'all today. I'm going to present on web accessibility testing and a little bit about Testim. So my name is Hannah. I've been at Tricentis for a couple years, really just working with companies around the US, helping them with functional testing of their customer-facing applications. So yeah. Okay. So here's what I am going to cover over the next 20 minutes. What is accessibility and what is the importance of accessibility testing, legal standards and consequences of ignoring, what is Testim and how can it help with accessibility testing, automation and DevOps, best practices, CI/CD pipeline guidelines, and then I'm going to do a short demo for y'all. Okay, so I imagine everyone here probably has a decent understanding of what accessibility is, but here's a few definitions for y'all. So having the capability of being reached, the degree to which a product, device, program, service, resource, or environment is available to a given user, or having the capability of being influenced. So when we talk about accessibility, who are the folks that specifically we're referring to in the grand scheme of web and digital applications? So these folks could be folks without or with limited vision, folks without speech, without the perception of color, folks with cognitive and learning capabilities like ADHD and dyslexia, folks without or with limited hearing, seizure disorders, motor disabilities, or temporary disabilities. So when we're talking about testing throughout the rest of today, these are the folks that we're talking about specifically to cater towards web accessibility testing. So when y'all think about the folks that are on the previous page, here are some examples of barriers to access. So reasons why people with the conditions on the previous slide might not be able to access web applications the same way that, for example, I would. So unlabeled form elements, zooming and scaling might be disabled. Elements are not following ARIA attributes. There's insufficient color contrast, insufficient tab index, empty headings. Those headings are disorderly or delayed refresh. There's a lot more, but here are some examples. And I'll give y'all a specific story. So this is Lakshmi. She's a senior accountant and she is blind and relies on a screen reader to announce the content of the software that she uses at work. So for Lakshmi or for someone who is blind or has limited vision, some specific barriers that those folks might have with accessing digital applications would be images without alternative text or captions. Shortcut keys conflict with screen reader commands, nested menus, inconsistent layout, or unclear error messages. So that's a brief background on accessibility testing, the folks that we're really talking about to cater to. A little bit of a history lesson on accessibility testing and where this came about. So it's outlined by the American with Disabilities Act, which was signed by Bush in 1990. And it's interpreted by the Supreme Court and it's enforced by the Department of Justice. So those are the governing bodies of who says y'all should be doing web accessibility testing. In terms of actual guidelines, there's a company called the World Wide Web Consortium, and they have created a set of guidelines called Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, in shorter terms WCAG. And so the Supreme Court, the Department of Justice, they said, hey, if you're looking to make your web applications more accessible, go follow the WCAG guidelines. So those are the benchmarks for compliance. And there's 3 grades. AAA is the most strict, so that's going to be any federal websites, some state websites as well. AA is the mid-range, and if you don't have a federal website, it's generally accepted that AA compliance is good enough, and then single A is the least compliant, or the least strict, I should say. Over here on the right, there's been 4 iterations of WCAG standards. The first one was in 1999. The latest one was actually last year in 2023, and here are some of the some of the guidelines that were improved upon. So findable help, focus appearance, dragging visible controls, redundant entry, and accessible authentication. Okay, and hopefully you guys are curious about WCAG and web accessibility after this talk. If you are and you go to the WCAG website, you're going to find that all of the standards, there's a lot of them, they're organized in 4 different principles. The first one is that they must be your application must be perceivable, so it has to be visible or presentable to the senses. The second, it has to be operable, so you have to be able to operate within the UI effectively. It has to be understandable, so the information and the operation of the UI have to appear in predictable ways. And the last, it has to be robust, so it has to be able to be interpreted widely by different types of people, users, and assistive technologies. Are y'all still with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. So if there's anything that you guys remember from my talk, it's that we're all humans and we all deserve to access applications the same way that anyone else would. So that is the major consequence. We're all humans and we all deserve to access different applications. But there are some other consequences of ignoring web accessibility testing. So the first is you could be hit with a legal case and penalties. So the Department of Justice can deliver civil penalties of up to $75,000 per violation and up to $150,000 for each additional violation. You can suffer brand reputational damage and the loss of your customer base. So if y'all Google web accessibility lawsuits, there are thousands of them. Here are some of the most famous ones. Sweet Green, Target was hit with a $6 million lawsuit. Fox News, Netflix, MIT, and Harvard. Okay, so there are a lot of tools in the market that can help with accessibility testing. I work for a company called Tricentis, and the tool that I work with is called Testim, and we do have web accessibility testing built into the tool. So a little bit about Testim. It is a functional UI automation tool for web, mobile, and Salesforce applications built for developers, for QA teams, for QA analysts. It's low code and very flexible, so it's not dependent on one type of user to be able to create tests. It's powered by AI in a few areas. I'll show you an example of how it is. It's very easy to determine why your tests are failing, so you're able to address it very quickly and effectively. It's very scalable to create tests very quickly. We integrate with lots of different CI/CD and bug tracking tools. And then lastly is not only is it a functional UI tool, but it's also an accessibility tool. One story I'll tell y'all. So I work with companies on the Pacific, anywhere west of New Mexico. And one of my customers, they've been a long-time Testim customer. They emailed me out of the blue in February and they said, hey, we need to have a call. We need to talk about web accessibility testing. When we got in the call, I asked them what's up, and they were hit with a lawsuit. It's a well-known retail brand. All of y'all are very familiar with them. So, and now they're doing really well with Testim and web accessibility testing. So before we get into the demo, I imagine one question you guys are asking is, okay, so we know what accessibility testing is. Testim is a tool that can help, but what am I supposed to do from here, and how do I implement accessibility testing into my development lifecycle? So most of Testim's customers are on an agile delivery model. So hopefully this looks somewhat familiar. But the answer to the question is really that accessibility testing should be built into every part of your release cycle and your development cycle. So when you're planning a new feature, a new product, a new platform, whatever it is, and you're building requirements, you're building test plans, test cases, web accessibility and accessibility as a whole should be built into those test plans. So you're planning on how people with different types of conditions are going to be able to access your application. Same with development, smoke testing. You'll definitely want to find a tool that can integrate in with your CI/CD tool. With testing, deploying, and production, accessibility should be in all of those different parts. Okay, so that is the end of the slides. I am going to show y'all a very quick demo of Testim. It's demo time. Okay. So I'm not going to do a deep dive of Testim. If anyone would like to see a deeper demo, I can absolutely schedule time to show y'all. I'm going to show you 4 things. 1, how do you build a basic test within Testim, including a web accessibility test. 2nd, when you have a test failure, specifically if Testim is finding that your application is not meeting web accessibility standards, what do you do? The 3rd is how we use artificial intelligence to keep tests stable and make sure that your application is not failing over and over again. And then the lastly is reporting. So Testim is a record and playback tool. So essentially what you're going to do is you would input the base URL here, which is going to launch the application. And then you can add a test name, a test description. If you are using a test case management tool, you can integrate that here as well. And then if you want to data drive your test, then you can do that using test data. So what I am going to do here is I have my base URL. I'm going to go ahead and start recording. So this is launching my application. This is our beautiful demo site. And I'm going to start interacting with different elements. So the way to think about this, since Testim is a functional UI tool, is any flows or processes that your customers might go through, you're testing that in Testim. So our customers are selecting the destination. Maybe they're picking a different location. They're adding a date and picking when they want to go on their fancy vacations. You'll see over here, this is Testim. So it's picked up everything that I'm clicking on and it's adding it to my tests. So same with login flows. And then over here on the right, so what Testim is telling me is, hey, someone on your team has actually already built a test that looks like this. So you can just add the shared steps and not go through the same repetitive nature. So that's what that is asking me there. And then the last piece here is I want to add I want to tell Testim, hey, test this element for accessibility. So we have a lot of built-in functionality here, validations, wait for, actions. But I'm going to go ahead and select my element, this login button here, and then I'm going to stop recording and go ahead and play this test back. So now Testim is going to go through the same flow that I just went through. Please ignore all of the icons on my dashboard. And then this last piece here where Testim is looking to make sure that this element is accessible, it takes a couple seconds, but this is going to fail. We built our demo site so that this particular element fails so that everyone can see that this demo site is not accessible. Okay. So now what Testim has done is telling me, hey, this test failed. It's telling me what the failure is at the top of the screen. So if I'm using a bug tracking tool, I can actually create a Jira ticket directly from this screen right here. But I'm interested in seeing what on my website was not accessible. So I've told Testim, I want you to pick up on any level of breaking those web accessibility WCAG rules. And when I click on this error here, Testim is now telling me, hey, this particular element in this example, it has insufficient color contrast. So it's going to be very difficult for someone that has color blindness to access this element. So that's the first one. And then the second one is that the tab index is not great enough. So again, it's going to be hard for someone with limited sight to see that element. So not only is Testim saying, hey, this isn't accessible, but it's also giving me the code that I can input into my code to fix that. So I can copy and paste that. I can send it to my developers, and then they can go ahead and add that to their code. Okay, so almost wrapped up. There's two more things I want to show y'all. One, everyone's aware of how crazy AI is these days. So Testim has been around since 2014, and we've had AI built into the tool since then. So one of the biggest ways in which we use artificial intelligence is keeping tests stable when your application changes. And so what Testim is doing is it's gathered all of the different attributes of elements, so parent, child relationships, classes, IDs, XPaths, CSS selectors, and it's compiling all of that in Testim, and it's saying, hey, this is what a model of what this element or what this page looks like. And so when I release to UAT, or if my developers change anything about the application, Testim is able to say, okay, is this actually big enough to fail the test, or do I want to go ahead and pass it? So not only that, but it does have auto improve in there. So the more that you run these tests, the more Testim is able to actually fix your tests so that you're not having to sit there and babysit them and edit all of these locators. The last thing I'll show y'all is reporting. So this is the test ops dashboard. You can see everything that's passed and failed, all of your tests that are active, quarantined, evaluating, etc. Some recent activity. And then over here, a little bit more visibility into your past test runs, how many tests you have actively running, your average duration. Down here, there was something that popped up that said tag this test failure, so I could do that and track where my test failures are coming from over time so that I can actually go and address that head on. So in this case, almost 20% of my test failures are coming from a bug in the application, which is a problem, and now I know that and I can go fix it. And then the last thing here is team productivity. So if you want to go and spy and see what your teammates are doing or your team, you can do that here. And that is Testim. That is my spiel on web accessibility testing. If you guys have any questions, let me know. But I appreciate the time and thank you for the audience.